guys, how's it going? My name is Dal, and we got ourselves even more class changes hitting Legion Remix, as Blizzard is trying to find some semblance of balance, while still allowing players to be as powerful as they want to within the Remix game mode. Particularly, they're trying to tackle the issue that is still the continuation of the strong tank meta, where tanks are essentially playing Legion Remix on easy mode and are grouping up together as a 5-man squads within Mythic Plus dungeons, which kind of makes DPS classes and healer roles pretty much worthless when it comes to really pushing some of the high-end content and farming infinite power more efficiently. And they're attempting to try to make it easier for DPS and healers to participate when it comes to some of the more challenging content that the game mode has to offer. With them attempting to fix it, they're also going through and are taking a second look at the open world content to make sure that solo players in particular can get even more power from some of the regular daily open world activities that most players are accustomed to. So I'm going to go over all of the newest class changes as well as world changes that have happened in Remix specifically. As always, if you guys want to keep up with all things Remix, be sure to follow the channel and subscribe. But otherwise, let's dive right in. I said it before, and I'll say it again. If you're playing a tank in Legion Remix or a class that has access to a tanking role, you're literally playing this game on easy mode. Tanks so far have had the easiest time pushing some of the highest content, doing the most efficient farming out there, and are able to tackle open world content, raids, and high-end dungeons with ease, while DPS and healers unfortunately have been a little bit suffering. Initially, Blizzard tried to do some buffs in order to try to make DPS and healers a little bit better when it comes to endgame content. Initially, what they did is they buffed up the artifact weapon effectiveness for DPS and healers to make sure that all damaging and healing effects are 20% stronger, which was good on its own as a buff. I mean, all of the abilities from your Dreadlord to the big spike that you blow them up with, maybe go into like a nature build. I don't know if anybody's really playing Arcane, but potentially Storms or Light Force. There are some people that are trying out different builds, and all those abilities are being buffed up. On top of it, they buffed up Naravan's Disc, so every time you catch it, it is far more effective every single time. They buffed up High Mountain Fortitude, which technically was good for healers and DPS, if you were able to go with a couple accessories in order to give you more survivability, if that's what you were looking for, as well as hybrids, things like damage and healing of Vindicated Judgment, as well as Light Vengeance. So they did end up doing some good buffs, which resulted in kind of an increase, particularly for DPS when it comes to, as well as healers when it comes to raids. In raids, I feel like DPS and healers can actually thrive and do well because raids don't have this infinite scaling quality like Mythic Plus do. Eventually, you hit a certain amount of gear and a certain amount of infinite power on your weapon where you're able to survive Mythic boss mechanics just fine. However, in Legion Remix, that's not where the push content comes from. Of course, some of the raids are going to be maybe difficult the first time around, like maybe on Taurus is where we'll see some real challenges potentially with how the bosses might be scaled. But when it comes to really pushing the test of limits of what your characters can withstand when it comes to PvE content, it really comes down to Mythic Plus. And in Mythic Plus, when you're really pushing some of the higher keys, where players are now pushing what? They went from 30s to 40s, 50s, and up to 100 plus 100 keystone levels. Yeah. Players are running into an issue where survivability becomes a big issue. Unfortunately, tanks have the best survivability in the game. And with the artifact weapon, how much damage it does for you, even on tanks, while they don't have that 20% damage amp on all those effects, you're still able to survive mechanics long enough to not get one shot to keep continuing to deal damage. Healers and DPS just can't compete compared to tanks when it comes to push content, which is where a lot of that efficient infinite power weapon farming comes from. So you really just feel like you're outside of raids, locked out on some of the more ludicrously good content that is insanely good when it comes to really trying to maximize the effectiveness of your character, which allows the tank meta to continue to thrive. However, it looks like Blizzard finally did listen to the community feedback, and they're actually making some changes to encourage more group play, but also to encourage better survivability for DPS and healers in Mythic Plus specifically. A new set of buffs have come down and is actually enabled right now as a hotfix in the game today. And now, whenever you enter a Time-Worn Keystone, Eternus is going to grant players buffs depending on their role. For DPS classes, it's going to be Gift of the Eternus Slayer, where DPS get to do 10% more damage, which is not the biggest increase, but it's pretty good. You also have 100% increase more health, and 33% decreased damage taken while inside of a time-worn Keystone dungeon. A similar buff has been given to healers as well with the Gift of Eternus Savior, which for healers it grants them 10% more damage but also 10% more healing and healing absorption, as well as the same buff as DPS, also more health and 33% damage reduction. And for tanks, their buff is Gift of the Eternus Protector, which doesn't actually do anything for them specifically. It doesn't buff their damage or anything like that. It instead allows Eternus to grant tanks 10% increased healing received from other players. So this is not self-healing, this is healing that you would get from a healer, for instance, to, I think, encourage group play and potentially allow tanks to consider bringing a healer into the group, because that healer is just going to be able to heal you more efficiently than you'll be able to heal yourself, because that is the whole role, is to be able to heal the group. So this set of changes could possibly allow healers and DPS to have a little bit more of that survivability, to take bigger hits, survive it even though barely, and still have the opportunity to be able to be healed from those hits to continue trucking, continue playing. This allows your DPS to deal damage while being able to participate, and potentially maybe allows your healers to be able to participate as well. And while this is overall a big set of buffs, my question is this going to be enough? And I feel like healers, out of all the roles, probably get shafted the most when it comes to Legion Remix. And I don't think it's anything Blizzard did specifically, it's just the way that Legion Remix has been designed. You're really pushing the limits, trying to go into the hardest content, trying to survive impossible odds, and the tanks are the best classes for it. But when you have a bunch of tanky classes that can maintain themselves, you don't really need a healer. And now that the meta is potentially going to shift into tanks and DPS, since DPS can survive, but if the DPS is able to survive enough, just enough to continue doing damage and wipe out packs before they get wiped out, do you still need a healer? I'm hoping that this will be enough to potentially allow healers to become more viable, but I feel like out of all the classes, since DPS have so many defensives and so much more survivability now, will you still need a healer going forward? And I could totally see them potentially make some changes in order to encourage more healer play. Either one would be to redesign a lot of mechanics to put a lot of rotting bleed damage that DPS classes can't really out-sustain, so you will need a healer. That, or potentially provide some kind of like a party buff if you do have a trifecta of a tank, healer, and DPS in a group, where maybe the group is rewarded with a huge buff if you're actually playing all of your roles instead of like a 5-tank stack or a multiple DPS stack instead. I guess only time will tell, but this set of new buffs and changes is overall good for survivability and potentially viability of DPS and healers within higher M+ content. Outside of this, they also ended up buffing open world content, which is definitely worth considering, because it felt like a lot of players were jumping into Mythic Plus dungeons and grinding there, since a lot of the open world content kind of got nerfed and set to the side a bit. But they were looking to buff up open world just a little bit for players that enjoy solo play specifically. So they're trying to make it easier for you to be able to gain more power just from open world activities. So now more open world content is going to drop you challenge mementos, which are some of the best mementos that when you combine 100 of them together, that's where you get the most amount of gain for your infinite power for your artifact weapon. And they're adding additional challenge memento drops to world bosses, rares on a daily lockout, as well as emissary requests, which are also available daily as well. On top of it, they're also making content that you complete in heroic world tier grant you even more fragmented mementos, specifically world bosses and rares. So as you're flying around and completing, slaying all of your rares, maybe clearing out a full slot of them throughout every single zone, you should potentially be able to get a little bit more mementos, hopefully significant enough amount in order to make a dent in your power progression. And I actually got to test out some of this content, specifically when it comes to challenge mementos and how many you do get, to see how good it is. It looks like rares right now are dropping about 3 challenge mementos per rare. If you see a rare along the way, I think it's worth slaying them, especially if you can take him out in like a handful of seconds. 3 extra mementos for a pretty easy kill in heroic world tier for even more mementos out of it, I think actually makes it pretty worth it. The emissary requests are also quite good. They still allow you to get like the chest in order to potentially get additional gear out of it, but they now drop you 20 challenge mementos, which is actually pretty decent. You only need about 100 mementos in order to be able to get at least 2, if not 3 upgrades to your weapon, depending how far along you are with your knowledge, but that is overall pretty good. And then of course there's the world boss, which I tried a couple of times. Initially on my paladin, it didn't look like I got any challenge mementos, but doing it again on my rogue, it looks like it drops you 20, which is also very solid. And since there's a world boss available every single day, you look at it in the emissary request for 20 mementos, world boss for 20, make it 40 together, and whatever rares you can kill along the way throughout your day, that can give you quite a bit of mementos just from open world activities specifically, which is yet another buff in order to allow players to gain additional power that much quicker in Legion Remix, which is overall a good change in my opinion. But with that being said, as always, I do want to thank all of you guys so much for watching, and I hope you guys did enjoy the video. If you did enjoy it or found it informative, go ahead and give it a like, as I would very much appreciate it. Also be sure to join our Discord community if you want to keep up with anything new and any of the newest updates regarding Legion Remix. As always, let me know your thoughts in the comments down below, and as usual, I'll see all of you guys in the next one.